Hey everyone, Pastor George here, and today I wanted to talk about a trend that's been kind of working its way through the American church over the past year and a half. But it's only become really big in the last year. And stuff this has been going on since the 60s, but it just has started to hit the church, especially with people who are millennials or people who are Gen Z. This is a big thing. And so you can't go on Christianity Today or TGC or Relevant or any of the other kind of big Christian magazines or do Christian YouTube or something like that or Twitter without seeing this word come up, and the word is deconstruction, right? Because a lot of people, especially in the American church right now in their 30s to late teen years, are currently doing something called deconstruction, which is where they're taking kind of the faith that they've gotten, and I guess it depends how you see it. Some people see it as, and I think this is closer to the original meaning, seeing what the culture of the United States or church culture has added into it and trying to get rid of those things. The other thing is just saying, or it's this idea that just trying to tear everything down, right, to its foundations or something like that. And this has led to all sorts of interesting dialogue and thoughts, because some people have taken this and just been it's all a sham. I want to everything's a lie. I want to leave, all that type of stuff. And others have been well, actually, it's helped us to kind of view things better because we've been able to remove our cultural lenses and stuff like that, right? And so you might just think, oh, that's an interesting thought experiment or something. But in actuality, I think it's actually an important thing to think about. And I don't really support it one way or the other. I think we should all be challenging our assumptions all the time. So in that way, I'm pro deconstruction, but I'm also not pro deconstruction in order to tear things down just for the sake of tearing them down, right? So I really put myself in the middle, and honestly, I'm kind of fed up of hearing about it all the time. But you know what? If you can't beat them, join them. So why not just enter into the space and put out one more video talking about it? But I mean, the only thing that I think matters here is that we do this consistently, right? I actually think everyone should do this. This idea of deconstruction comes from the 60s. And it's this idea that just to use a fancy philosophical term called postmodernism, it's this idea that the world as it is, these ideas that we've inherited don't just exist or in the space, right? They have a history, and we have our own biases and assumptions built into them. And so in the 60s and stuff, they went, well, maybe we should, start to question some of those biases or show that people have biases when they come into thinking about these things. And I think there's a lot of good in that. I think the problem, though, is that people usually use it in order to justify bad behavior or something like that. One of the ways you can see this actually working its way through our system now is in this, and this has just happened within the past 6 to 8 months, where you've had this big trend of people challenging age of consent laws in the United States, right? And that's really interesting, right? Because they're saying, well, why is it 18? And of course, to be fair, these are kind of arbitrary things that have been put up, right? But instead of just being well, maybe, it's 18 because that's kind of when you're able to vote or whatever, they'll be no, it's arbitrary, and so we have to get rid of it, right? That's an example of applying this type of thinking, right? And that, as you can see, can have really bad consequences. But there's been a big push for that recently among a lot of different groups and stuff like that. And that's an example of deconstructing the idea of age of consent, right? But people will take that to the church and they'll say, well, why is there American flags? Why are there all these other type of things? Aren't all these things bad or whatever, and get away? And in some ways, this is a good Protestant tradition, at least. But Christian more generally, of just reform, right? We want to reform the church. We want to make it better. We want to make it truer to the gospel and stuff like that. And the point is that should actually be our purpose. Now, I think a lot of this happens in churches, and this is where this has really been taking off, in churches that don't have a good understanding of their own history or their understanding of being in a tradition, right? So it's happening a lot in independent churches, evangelical churches, Baptist churches, stuff like that, right? Where they kind of view themselves at the time as being just the church, right? And kind of disconnected from the past. But if you actually do and understand this process of like centuries of reformation, right, that the church has gone through, of like continually trying to get back to the Bible. Deconstruction could just be seen as another way of doing that. But the point is, and this is kind of why the Reformed tradition that we're in is really important, because we have kind of this saying, reformed and always reforming, right? Because we put the Bible at the center of our Christian life. So we always want to get back to that, right? We always want to make sure that what we're teaching actually corresponds to what the Bible has to say, because that's the eternal truth of God, right? And kind of get rid of the things that we put in that distract from it, right? So that's what I have to say about deconstruction, which is a pretty milquetoast take, I'll admit it. But you know what? I'm not here to get clicks. I'm just here to teach you guys. So yeah, have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. I will see you guys tomorrow for our Bible study recap and Thursday for the mailbag. Have a good one. Peace out.